Hello, folks. Welcome to this edition of Al's Joint. We have a lot to discuss today. So let's take the gloves off and let's get at it. So, folks, we've seen millions of Americans take to the street to protest Elon Musk and Donald Trump's policy and to show this administration that we're going to fight to keep our democracy. We're going to fight to keep our country. So millions of folks in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Dallas, Houston, Philadelphia, Miami, even smaller cities, Clarksburg, West Virginia, Xenia, Ohio, they came out in force in some of the largest rallies that you've seen outside of a presidential campaign. But the big question is, why is the media so set to label these rallies as tens of thousands instead of the millions that actually participated? We need to hold the media responsible and take them to task. They'll report on stupid items that Trump throws out there. They'll go overboard with that. But when there's a rally, they want to try to make the rally seem like they were much smaller so people can think that, okay, America's not fighting back. Look at these videos.
It's time to fight! Our people are united! It's time to fight!
Genocide, we say no!
Donald Trump has got to go!
Genocide, we say no!
Donald Trump has got to go!
Hold up. His grandmother. Great.
Everyone make your voices heard and make sure they hear us!
Does that look like tens of thousands of people to you? If I looked at the LA video, there's tens of thousands of people at the LA rally. Tens of thousands of people at the New York City rally. There were tens of thousands of people at the Chicago rally. There were over 1,000 rallies held, but the media tried to downplay it because they probably don't want to upset Donald Trump and face his wrath. That, folks, is serious. When the media starts to misrepresent what's happening, we have to fight them too. The revolution is starting. The question is, are you going to engage or are you going to sit this one out too? Folks, it's something that I've been doing some research on, and I want you to do the same research. Because for years, the Republicans were hollering that the election was stole, the big steal. That's why they tried to overthrow the government on January 6th. But if you do some research, I'm going to use Pennsylvania for an example, right? But I'm sure there are many other states that have the same model. When you look at the numbers of registered voters in every county in Pennsylvania, and if you look at any area where there's a large metropolitan areas, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Erie to some degree, where you have Republicans and Democrats checking each other, the percentage of Republican voters is at one level, right? Same with Democratic voters too. It's kind of they kind of balance out. They're within a margin of error if you use that term. Say you give yourself a 5% cushion on the percentages, But when you go up into what we call the T in Pennsylvania, in these isolated red counties, that percentage skyrockets. And my question would be, if you're motivated to vote for Trump, why would it change whether you live in an isolated county or a county with some density, right? That would be like if you have a group of students when they're at school and they're studying and they're taking tests, they're B students. But when they're homeschooled, they become A students. How did that happen? Because they cheated. It's our time to figure out. We know about the voter suppression. We know about the mail-in ballots that weren't counted. There were objections which led to them not being counted. We know that. But if you take as many counties there are in some of these states, and you're able just to shave off an additional 1,000 votes in every county, because nobody's looking over your shoulder. Nobody's challenging these folks in these counties. The Republicans are good for doing it. Democrats don't go up in these isolated counties and challenge votes. So they know that number goes up. How does that happen? Consistently, do the research yourself. The percentage jumps up 10, 12%. I'm going to use that model and start looking at other states so I can get back to you. But you need to look at your state, and you wonder why. If you lose a state by 60,000 votes, and you got all these rural counties voting without anybody checking into it, those are easy swing states to win. So my point is, did Trump win the election? We need to look into this, folks. So, folks, I want to have a discussion on the stabbing at the Texas track meet. And I don't want to get into who's right, who did what. Process will play itself out. We'll come up with an answer at some point that way. But I want to talk about the hypocrisy that surrounds it. If you look at some of the kind of social media news on it, as well as some of the national news picking up the story and repeating it, right? They tend to try to show the black youth in a negative light and the white youth as this all-American kid. That's the hypocrisy that bothers me. That and the fact that we have the negative comments on social media, they get into the stereotypical comments and the racist comments, right? That's his neighborhood. That's what folks from the hood do. They're either thug, the whole narrative. But what I want to touch on is that when you have the Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and look, I can go on. I can name thousands of blacks who were killed because they were black for no other reason, whether it was by police, whether they were lynched, whether they were burnt, whether they were hung in a tree. It can go on and on and on. And if you go back and look at the comment sections, pull up one of those cases on the internet and read the comments. No matter how clear cut it was, there were folks on there with their stereotypical bullshit, right? Attacking the victim. So when you wonder why people of color circle the wagons when we have incidents like that. Because here in the United States, when you're a person of color, you're guilty until proven innocent. If you're killed by a white, there had to be a reason why your life was taken. You had a hoodie on, you were eating Skittles, you were slow getting out of the bed to answer the door to somebody busting your door down without identifying themselves as police officers. It goes on and on. So the hypocrisy here is killing me. And you'll see some of the comments, they'll say, why are you saying this? If it was vice versa, it's always been vice versa. Don't tell me if it was a white kid had killed the black kid. That would just add to the thousands, the tens of thousands of other blacks who were killed by whites unjustly. I don't know how this will play out, but I do know that the way folks are responding is that they've forgotten everything that's happened. Hell, January 6th, the insurrection, when they tried to overthrow our government. Can you imagine if 10,000 blacks had stormed the Capitol? How many of them do you think would have been shot? And guess what? To be honest with you, had 10,000 blacks stormed the Capitol and got shot, we would have been at home saying, what the hell were you thinking? You should have been shot. We wouldn't have been saying they were trying to liberate us and agree with a pardon. All those folks who did that, who killed those police officers, they were pardoned. They're home free. Police officers, folks who died that day, they're still dead. But you have the audacity to write in the comments and wonder why folks are circling the wagons. I tend to call it the O.J. Simpson effect, right? I, for one, always thought O.J. was guilty. I had no doubt about it. And I'll guarantee you that half the black community thought the same thing. But they circled the wagons. Most of them didn't even like O.J. Simpson. Some of them didn't even know who he was. But what he represented was the systemic racism, somebody fighting back against it who had enough money and fame to do it. That's what that was about. So in this particular instance, we have two teenagers, right? It's a tragedy either way. It's a tragedy for both. Lord knows I don't want to condone a killing. It's quite the opposite, especially our youth. But if you're wondering why folks are being overly protective of this situation, look in the mirror and you'll see the reason. Now, to segue into something more current, the Quadir and Nazir Lewis twins, the 19-year-old teenagers who were found killed in Towns County, Georgia. We had a media reported it. They tried to label it a murder-suicide. When everybody started raising Cain saying, what the hell are you talking about? That wasn't them. And it happened 90 miles away from their home in a place where they'd never been, in a sundown area, in an all-white county. And all of a sudden, we hear no other news since then. What else have you heard? What did the investigation? They still haven't told us anything about, did they ever make it to the airport? Was there any video? Where was the gun at? There's a ton of evidence that they could have released. They haven't done anything yet. Hell, it took them 2 days to figure out who killed Martin Luther King. 1 day to figure out who killed JFK. You mean to tell me they can't release no information a month after these young teenagers were killed? What would have happened if 2 white teenagers were killed in a black neighborhood and somebody said they just showed up and shot themselves with murder-suicide? What would the outcry be? So if you don't understand why folks are circling wagons, then you never will.
This episode of Al's Joint is brought to you by Jackpack.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of Al's Joint. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button and share with your friends. Join me next week when we visit Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, have some discussions with the folks around the mayoral race up there and some of the shenanigans that are trying to be pulled by some of the Trump supporters. We're going to take the gloves off and we're going to get at it. Take care.